retirement crisis seems inevitable. The research says that almost a third of U.S. households don't have any retirement savings. Most of the rest don't have enough. Social Security and Medicare are unsustainable. But we've known all this for a long time. At what point does the crisis become acute?
I think the Social Security is going to end up being actually a pretty important key here, because when you see the broad statistics, Social Security, if with a few changes, is actually I do believe can be sustained, and it covers a pretty broad group of people. You got to remember the median income in America is about $50,000 per family, and if you look at sort of your bottom half of earners, Social Security will do a reasonable job covering a pretty high percentage of what they need in retirement. It's not to say that there shouldn't be strong supplementation through savings and so forth. Your highest earners, have a lot of opportunities to set money aside. It's that kind of upper middle class, as we used to describe it, that I think is where the most acute need is going to arise. And there, I think it's really important that we get a message out that savings rate just has to change. And I'll give you, just a couple of stats. Our 401k clientele, so we get a chance to look at 4 million or so investors every day. On average, they're setting aside between 9 and 10%. It's not bad. We think the number needs to be closer to 15. And the more aggressively we can get that message out, the sooner we can get people moving to that number. I think we at least stand a chance of putting off that issue and actually I think mitigating that issue.
Right. Well, even 9 to 10% is pretty good. That's well above the national average.
It's well above the national average. And again, when people talk about increasing savings rates, some of the economists get nervous because they're like, well, what's going to happen to the consumer and consumer spending? It's another topic. But we actually think that people have to get to that higher level. I mean, if you do the arithmetic, and that's what it comes out.
Right. Well, is there any evidence that what we've just gone through has maybe changed people's attitudes about this in a good way?
I would say there's a couple of data points, and it'll be interesting to see how sustainable they are. First, everybody's reported that savings rates are up, and what you're seeing is actually people pay down debt, which is reflected in the savings rate. I think it's terrific. Okay, I think it's a really good thing that we're seeing, and actually we should be encouraging this. We saw during the crisis very little curtailment by our 401k investors in terms of their contributions. There was a small percentage of companies that suspended their match, but I think when it was all said and done, it was about 10%. And investors kept putting money into the funds over this period. And I think that was a really, really positive sign that people actually get it. And again, and this is all anecdote at this point because we're still just coming out of this, but I do a lot of investor forums where I talk to either plan sponsors or I actually go out and meet with some of our retail clients. And there's definitely a different attitude around savings.